Hey, welcome to Mind Your Own Biz, the podcast where we help small business owners with big dreams build something authentically you. I'm Alicia Yervis, educator, marketer, designer, nacho enthusiast, and your big sister in business. I'm excited for us to have this cozy spot to chat. Each episode, we'll tackle candid conversations, actionable tips, and a few fun tangents to help you run your business your way. Because business is always personal, no matter what anyone says. So grab your iced coffee or those nachos, and let's get started. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Mind Your Own Biz. I am your host, Alicia Yervis, and I'm so excited to do something different today. I am welcoming my very first guest on this episode or on this podcast. As you know, I started out with solo episodes. Like I told you guys, just kind of ripping off the Band-Aid, trying things out, taking imperfect action. So I started with solo episodes, and I knew eventually I wanted to welcome guests who are folks that I think would be just awesome to have fun conversations with about how to do things your own way in business, bringing more creativity into your life, dealing with mental health struggles and imposter syndrome and all the different things that we deal with as entrepreneurs. And when I was figuring out who were going to be, my first couple guests, I could not think of anyone better than today's guest to be my number one. And her name is Emily Griffith. She is a friend of mine, but before she became a friend of mine, she was a client. And we've known each other for a long time, I think since 2018 or 2019. And she was, and I'll talk more about this in the episode when we start chatting, but she basically embodied who and what a dream client is for me and my business. And we talk a little bit about that in this episode. But she is just the best. I love her so much. And I'm so excited for you to meet her. So, Emily Griffith is the creative mind behind Felt Right, a grief and life coaching service born out of love and loss. She launched her business on what would have been her sister's birthday, honoring her memory and transforming her grief into a mission to help others heal. A passionate advocate for emotional well being, Emily brings a deep personal touch to her work, drawing from her own experiences and a commitment to supporting her clients as they navigate life's challenges with empathy, creativity, and practical tools, one heartfelt conversation at a time. So I'm so excited to welcome Emily. She is just a joy. And she's also a Jersey girl and a Springsteen fan. And she's just the best. So here's our chat. Hello, my friend. I'm so excited that you decided to be, or you agreed to be, my first podcast guest. You and I have known each other a long time. And you are somebody who, when I think of like my ideal clients, of course, you are front of mind. You are the front of that list, but also how many of my clients have become my friends, and that started with you. You were my first like client to become a real friend, and I just love you so much. And I can't believe we've known each other since like 2019 or whenever that was. Crazy times. But I knew that when it was time for me to start my guest episodes, I wanted you to be the first. Um, so this podcast is all about how to do business your way, and all of the many ways that what that can mean. And so, I already in the introduction explained a bit about your business, Felt Right, and your story, but I would love to hear from you. What called you to kind of break out of corporate and start on this path, and how your business has evolved because it's changed a bit since you started. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I it's such a kind of long and crazy story, so I'm gonna try to condense it as much as possible. But in 2008. Now, meanwhile, I didn't go out on my own until, yeah, 2018, 2019. But in
Mm-hmm.
2008, my mom and my sister were diagnosed with cancer within 2 weeks of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have this image of myself going into this soulless, windowless office in the Midtown Manhattan when I was working and telling my boss first about my mom and then 2 weeks later telling her about my sister and was just like, this is lunacy. I this isn't a life. This is barely an existence as I'm showing up to this cubicle, breakfast, lunch, and dinner at my desk,
Mm-hmm.
me in Microsoft Excel, like that was it. And it just got to the point where I'm like, I was told, and many of us, especially as Americans, were told that, the American dream and what that all looks like and what that all entails. And part of it was like, yeah, go to school, get your degree, go to a company and like work your way up. And
Mm-hmm.
I just found I was going from company to company, just thinking in my head, like, okay, this will be a better culture fit. Like, I'll feel like I fit in here, or I could be, productive or impactful here. And it just got worse and worse as I kept, going from different places to where I had this epiphany and revelation, coupled with the fact that two very important people to me were sick and facing their mortality. It was just like uh, corporate wasn't made with a person like me in mind. And
Mm.
frankly, corporate wasn't made for a majority of us actually in mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I could continue to pretend and go from job to job thinking, okay, this is going to be, a productive and fruitful life, or I could figure something else out. And it really didn't start to go down until 2017 when my mom had passed away. So I was working in corporate, she passed, and then 2 months later, I quit my job and felt amazing for like 5 seconds until I realized I don't have a job. Who does that? What just happened?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I reached out to a friend who was working at Lululemon at the time, and I was like, hey, I just need to have a job where I can literally punch in and punch out, not have to worry about a thing when I'm off the clock. And as I figure out what I'm going to do next, that's not going to completely crush my soul because all of that was absolutely soul crushing.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, yeah, it's great. Send over your resume and I'll forward it on. And, it's really flexible. So, yeah, absolutely. The next day, I go into my CrossFit gym and there's a note on the whiteboard that there's a Lululemon that was opening up 10 minutes from my house.
Mm.
And here's the manager's information if you want to get a job. And I was like, is this a joke? Yeah, okay. So I apply, I get the job. So I'm working retail and then there was a yoga teacher training program that I've been thinking about and looking at for years. And I'm like, okay, what better time than now? I actually do have some time to actually do this. Still not knowing. Still is like, I don't know exactly what all of this means, but if I just figure out the next step, that's
Mm-hmm.
all I need to focus on right now. That's all I have the bandwidth for right now.
Mm.
So I do that. I start teaching yoga. And it was really my first one-on-one client that she started talking to me in real time as I was guiding her through the practice. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting because usually I'm in a room with 15 to 30 people who obviously are
Right.
doing their own thing. And so that was where Felt Right was born. Because the next time I saw her, I brought her a notebook and pen. And I was like, hey, as things are coming up as we're going through this, whether you write it down during, before, or after, we can talk about it. We don't have to talk about it. It's just, another way to, process what's happening. And yeah, what you said earlier, like my business has had a lot of iterations before that, but the crux of it, the main point was me leaving corporate was because seeing my mom and my sister face their mortality made me face my own. And I was like, okay, I
Mm,
don't
my
want to
God.
just survive. Like, I want to, hey, if I'm here for a short time, not a long time, like, I want to enjoy this human experience. And it's interesting that entrepreneurship has been such a savior for me in that way.
Wow. Wow. I love that because I mean, there's so much to pull apart in what you just said. Like first, something amazing has come out of such a huge challenge and such a deep sadness and a deep grief and loss. And in a way, like, catapulted you into this new path, for one. And for two, you were in a way kind of picking up like these little hints from the universe, these little like winks of like breadcrumbs of things. Like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is going to become, but like this feels right. And let me start this. Let me, put my toe into this and let's like figure it out along the way. And then through collaboration and experience with your client, it introduced, or it kind of like awakened a new thing in you, or gave you another new idea of how you could make your own thing and expand on a more, I guess, traditional type of yoga practice or session into this more interactive, kind of multi-medium, multifaceted kind of thing,
Yeah.
that allowed you to like create your own kind of solution, or your own kind of package, your own kind of offer that met your client where they were at. But before even getting into, working with clients and stuff like that, just having that difficult period in your personal life that at the same time like shook you into, I don't want to be stuck here. This isn't, what is true life and death. Like this is not where I want to be. Like this, you're right, corporate wasn't cut out for, or corporate wasn't made for most of us. We're all so individual with so many different needs and everything. But just having you have the courage to say, I'm out, and I'm leaping without a net, and I'm figuring out the net later. Like, I think for people listening to this, like that is so huge um to have the guts to do that. And at the same time, it's like it sucks that you had to go through what you went through to have that realization. And yet at the same time it makes a lot of sense. Like people say, it takes a big moment or a big lesson or a big loss to realize what's really important, or to realize like how you really want to prioritize stuff. So like when you started feeling those things, was it more of like a, would you say it was like a process to get to that mindset where you decided to finally cut the cord, or was it like pretty immediate?
It was a process, and I didn't realize the process was happening even before my mom and my sister were sick,
Okay.
because my I lost my dad when I was 19. He
Mm-hmm.
had a heart attack. And so my dad's whole thing was like, okay, even though he was an entrepreneur, him and my mom ran an insurance agency that was in my dad's family since the late 1880s. He understood the highs and the lows of entrepreneurship. And, when it's good, it's great. But when it's shaky, it's like, it
Oh
feels like the
yeah.
world's caving in.
Oh yeah.
So his like parental advice was like, my boys, like, you're going to go get pension jobs. Like my daughters, like, you're going to get nursing jobs because those are in demand and you'll always have work. And
Mm-hmm.
congratulations to me, I'm father of the year. And meanwhile, three of my brothers worked at the agency, the family business. My
Mm-hmm.
other brother has a ticketing business, which is his own business. My sister was the only one who, and I originally going into corporate, but she became a nurse and a nurse practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though, that was his, wisdom or advice, just even through school and just constantly questioning, like, is this the only way? Is this really the only path?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I'm on it, so let's just see. And like I said earlier, through every job, I'm like, this is really awful. Like
Mm.
the work so much wasn't awful. It was 9.5 out of 10 times working with a terrible boss.
Mm.
So I'm like, if these people have my livelihood in their hands,
Yeah.
and across the United States, a majority of states are at will employment, so they don't even have to really provide a legitimate reason as to why they could get rid of you today, tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, is going out on my own really that much of a bigger risk?
Mm-hmm. That's such a good question. I feel like so many of us have had tough bosses, bad bosses, difficult bosses, whatever. Um, and it's interesting because when I relate a lot with what you were saying about like, is this the only path? Like, this is what we're told we're supposed to do. Like, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. Um, so like I shared this in the first episode of this podcast, a little bit about my path and my journey. Like, I graduated high school and then I went to college and I picked the wrong school, but that's a another story. But I didn't really find my place there, and I didn't have a lot of friends, and I really hated college, and I had distractivitis because I was really close to New York City, and I would, be 8 minutes from Times Square and or just hop on the train and go do whatever. And I found my people in the city and kind of found my community there and realized like, I want to pursue theater or I want to get into music or whatever. And so I left school. And that was like a major freaking existential crisis I was having at the time because I'm like, I'm not somebody who drops out of school. Like that's not like what the hell is that? Like, I was a good student. Like I figured I would just graduate and then I would get a job and then I would this and then I would that. And I didn't. And so I, went to Brooklyn for a while, ran out of money, had to move home, and because like it's one of those things where if this hadn't happened, then that wouldn't have happened, then that wouldn't have happened. And all of that put me eventually on this path. And my path has been very roller coastery and twisty turny and not linear. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, where you think it's going to be linear, you think it's supposed to be linear, and it's not. And everything eventually set me on my way of kind of falling into marketing and then falling into social media and design and then falling into entrepreneurship. I didn't go to school for any of that. But what's so interesting is that like when you're saying, there's options, there's other ways, like, we're all so individual. I really did not see other options or pathways until I decided to leave my corporate job and go out on my own with entrepreneurship. Like, I didn't aspire to do this, but
Same.
and like, I couldn't like even think of like how am I going to do this without having like a paycheck every 2 weeks? How am I going to do this without having a boss? Like I'm going to be my own boss. How is that going to work? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to buy groceries and eat? Now, being 8 years into entrepreneurship, I am so much more open and accepting of how much opportunity exists in the universe. And I wish that folks who are still kind of trapped in that corporate space could open themselves up to see what actually is possible. And I'm just saying it was hard for me to see what was possible until I was out.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Everyone is on their own timeline with that, right? So, like, for me, even though I was questioning and I was always so curious, way before my mom and my sister got sick, at the same time, it wasn't until they got sick that it really just like imploded any ideas of like what's normal, what's okay, what's right. It's just like,
Hmm.
oh, this is all made up. So, okay, so it's like whatever you buy into or wherever your focus is. And to your earlier point, it's like I didn't know. I wondered.
Yeah.
I posed that question to myself, but I'm like, no, that's like for other people. I'm doing this. And then yeah, once they got sick, I was like, None of this even matters. So
Yeah, and also you going through that with your mom and your sister, it also quickly brings into like stark contrast what is very important and what is not, and what matters to you and what does not, and what you want to protect and what you could give two shits about, and
mhm.
all of that kind of thing. So like if you were, to speak to, maybe someone who's stuck in a job like that, or, questioning like, is there anything else for me? Is this as good as it gets? Is this it? Like, what would be some questions that they could maybe ask themselves? What would you suggest to kind of put you on the spot?
The first thought I had right away, so there's a lot of people who I think assume like, okay, if corporate's not for me, I just have to, that's really the way that I did it, which I don't necessarily recommend, especially if you really have zero inkling or idea what you want to potentially do next. Because again, I felt like seriously euphoria for 5 seconds, and I was like,
Oh
and then the 5 seconds was over. I'm like, I don't have a job.
my God. Yeah.
There's, it seems like, side hustle culture is a really big thing. And I don't know whether it's like dabbling, not necessarily giving up your full-time gig right away,
Yeah.
especially. But at the same time, though, if mental health is completely eroding, which was the case for myself, it's like, okay, I could try to stay and do this, but I'm going to lose myself. And
hmm
it's already feels like I've lost a little bit of myself along this way.
hmm
So the ones that don't feel completely like that, I would advise, just like a little dabble or little, just like things that you're curious about or wondering about, like researching a little more and seeing,
hmm
like, okay, is there opportunities or there's ways to whether there's someone that's already doing it, asking them for a coffee to kind of pick their brain.
Love
There's a
that.
lot of people who are open to that. There's some people who are going to be like, yeah, no, thank you. I don't have time. Like, don't get discouraged by that because there's
Yeah.
plenty of people who are open and who get it and who have been in the position that you've been in before.
hmm
Um, but yeah, this whole idea of, being stuck, I feel like a lot of people feel that. And I know for myself, again, even before my mom and my sister got sick, I was vigilant. I was so just making sure my overhead was as low as possible. So
hmm
there's a stigma of like, the guy who like lives in his basement and he's a certain age, like whatever. For me, I was the girl who was living in the attic and renting from my aunt.
I
Because,
remember.
yeah, and that's where Felt Right was born because I
hmm
knew I had a roof over my head. The rent was very reasonable,
hmm
a little too reasonable. And it was like I was able to feed myself, have a roof over my head, I had insurance and also had creative bandwidth to be like, okay, now I can really think about, I'm slowly climbing out of survival mode.
Mm.
So what does the next thing look like? And going back to what I said earlier of I just need to figure out like the next minuscule baby step to like give me the forward momentum. So
hmm
yeah, it was literally that woman who was talking to me during her yoga session that inspired it. And then after that, because originally, and maybe I should save this for when we bring this up later, as far as what felt right was and how it continues to evolve, because what it was once is no longer.
hmm
It's not completely different, but definitely a different iteration of it.
hmm
But I'm so thankful for that because that's the beauty of having your own business is that, hey, if you want to do this thing and you don't like it or it's not working out or whatever the case may be, you get to change it as you see
hmm
fit to make it really
hmm
work for you and to work for the clients that you're serving.
hmm
So I don't know if I
I
answered your question because I think I
I
kind of
did.
went on a tangent.
No, you did. And I am going to come back to that about the different iterations to kind of understand, the the timeline or how it flowed from where we started to where we are. But before we get there, I just want to touch on something that you just said that I think is really important about when you're thinking like, okay, I feel like I'm meant for more. I feel like there's something else inside me that I want to do, but I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. I love the idea of dabbling, of like, I'm going to spend an afternoon or an evening or an hour doing some research because something that's been really helpful for me in therapy that I've tried to pull into my life is facts versus feelings.
Ooh, yes.
Like, because, and I just actually, wait, let me look at it because I just shared something today on Instagram stories that I loved, loved, loved. Um, there's an account that Sit with Allison shared this account or this post that says, "Stop booing yourself off stage before anybody had a chance to see you perform." Like, holy shit. And I think that's where facts versus feelings comes in because you're like what you just said, oh, someone else already does this. Someone, does something similar, or, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. I'd have to, that would be so expensive, or I'd have to save up 3 years of salary, or, I couldn't do that. I don't know how. I'm not good enough. I haven't been doing it long enough. Whatever these things are. And a lot of it is imposter syndrome shit that you can't necessarily research your way out of. But there is research to do. There are some things you can look up and like get the actual fact on something before you write something off, before you say, I'm not even going to attempt that, or that's too much of an effort, or whatever. Because even doing that research, that's your first step. That's you moving forward on something instead of just this, ping pong in your brain constantly of all the things. So I love, love, love that you said that. And I think, being able to challenge yourself to actually identify the facts of a situation is going to help with your nerves. It's going to help with your planning. It's just going to help, period. Um, so I love that you mentioned that. So before we go into how your business has evolved and how you work with your clients currently, talk to me a bit about when you decided you were going to start and you were, well, we were working together on, branding and the website and all that kind of stuff. What made you decide to, um, go through that process of establishing an online home, a visual kind of identity for your brand, and what were some of the thoughts you had around that process or why that was important?
The timing of everything is really wild because originally, I mean, I was, contacting or researching, all key players of, people who had expertise in areas that I didn't. And a lot of
Mhm.
entrepreneurs are very scrappy and they are DIYing their whole thing, which props to them. Like for
Sure,
me,
yeah.
that just wasn't what I wanted to spend my time doing. Although,
Hmm.
even though I was, working with you, working with my lawyer, working with bookkeepers, getting all my documents and everything, website, branding, all that going
Hmm.
on. The thing is, I didn't really talk about what I was doing. And I was
Mm.
really naive in that I was going into it like, yes, I'm going to be a private one-on-one yoga instructor while also doing general life coaching and not understanding or acknowledging the fact that, oh yeah, you're also a business owner, you're the marketer, you're the salesperson, you're like you named
You're
the
wearing all
job.
the hats.
You're wearing all the hats, which I was like, no, no, like I'm gonna show up like, hey, I'm here, like ta-da. And that was a big wake up call of, launching the website when we did, which was on my sister's, what would have been my sister's birthday, which
Hmm.
meant everything to me. And, people were like, oh yeah, cool, congrats, great. And then it was like crickets.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I should have been actually talking about this instead of like doing this behind the scenes thing, thinking like I'm turning on my, hey, we're open sign and like people are gonna come a flocking. So I feel like what was your original question? Because I just
Or
completely.
just that you decided like, okay, one of the things I want to do as a new business owner, I want to get some
Hmm.
branding. I want to get my website. I want to like establish myself as a branded identity, like as a buttoned up or kind of, professional look to everything. Because I think like a lot of folks who are just starting out might put that on the back burner for a bit, until maybe, they're a little further down the line. But I feel like you kind of came in like, I'm ready. I have a vision. This is what I want to do. I want to, and I understand what you're saying about like, okay, there were crickets once we got it, once we got it open, but then you eventually found your process. Um, but why was that important to you in the beginning, I guess?
And see, depending on how you look at it, this could be a good thing or maybe something that slows you down, right? So there's people who go about it, building it and doing it as they're going, like getting clients and figuring all that out, which I just didn't have the mind space or the understanding of like that was the way that you could do it. Again, back to like, okay, if there's a way to do it, this is the way. It
Hmm.
just, I originally had the idea of having a small office space. So I was looking, my brothers and my parents had this insurance agency. And so I was gonna like talk to my brother about potentially converting the garage of that space to be my office where I can lay out two yoga mats and have like a small
Hmm.
desk.
Mm-hmm.
And it really wasn't until when COVID happened. So we launched the website September of 2019. I was figuring that stuff out, seeing if I could, convert the space and make a physical office space. And then COVID comes. I get COVID of March of 2020, and I'm introduced
Oh,
to
I
Zoom.
forgot you had it right away. That's right.
I like
Oh.
So I was living in Jersey City, right outside Manhattan. Manhattan was like exploding, and all the people
Mm-hmm.
who lived in my brownstone, they all worked in Manhattan, including my husband. So, and meanwhile, I was working from home, but again, not even understanding or realizing that I was eventually going to go to 100% solely online.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I get COVID and I'm introduced to Zoom and I'm like, wait, what is this? Wait, I can do this from anywhere in the world. So, that's what made me, well, that decision made me 100% decide that I was going to be strictly online going
Mm-hmm.
forward. But as far as your question of like what made me want to get the branding and all that, it just seemed like that was the order of operations for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, I was research, and I always forget this, and you always have to remind me what the website is because I was literally Googling
Oh.
like creative women or creative.
It's Creative Lady Collective or
Okay, so
Creative Lady Directory. Oh my God, I'm wrong. Creative Lady Directory. That's it.
so I'm putting in Google like creative women in New Jersey or something like that, like
Because we're both
or
Jersey girls.
right, exactly. Thank you. And so that's literally how you came up.
Hmm.
And I met my lawyer who drew up my contracts because she was at a yoga class and she went from big law to establishing her own boutique law services and that works specifically with small businesses. So I'm like, yes, you.
Hmm.
A friend of mine who owns her own business was using this bookkeeper who is fantastic and lovely. And so ever since I've been working with her.
Hmm.
So these things just felt like, again, just the next step. What is the next
Yeah.
step? And for me, that was my path that I took of like, okay, I want to have everything kind of put in order first before because I literally don't know what I'm doing and I'm like literally figuring this out one baby step at
Hmm.
a time.
Hmm.
So to me, that just seemed like the right order to do things in
Hmm.
for myself, not
Sure.
necessarily for anybody else.
Totally. Exactly. And that's just it. Like you have to do what feels right to you. What's your timing, what's your vibe, what's your style. And that's what I love so much about your branding and your website in particular. And we did a fun photo shoot too. Um, is that not only is it super colorful, which I just love just on a personal note, but it feels very authentic and real. It's you coming through, it's your personality. And I think well, I know that um, makes you stand out when folks are able to be themselves in their business through their content, through their marketing, through, their branding and all that stuff. It makes you stand out. People can feel it. Like one of my favorite things that I always credit you with is that when we were doing your business cards, I remember you were like, I want to put on there that I also can do heartstorming sessions with you, like instead of brainstorming. And I was like, oh my God, that's so good. Like, that's just such a nice little differentiator. So, did you feel like when you were, starting to think through how your brand was going to look and feel, the vibe you wanted to put out there, did you instinctively know that you wanted it to look and feel and sound like you, or did that come through once we started working, or did you have any prior thoughts about that?
I mean, I knew if I'm going to be my own boss and have this business that it was going to be 100% me
Hmm.
in all its glory and horror. And I I think I mean, you excel in so many areas, but where you really shine, at least for me and my experience with you, is that you the way that you listen and the way that you're able to extract things and then kind of repurpose and then ask a question to dig a little bit deeper. I feel like first of all, I just feel like we got each other immediately. Like
Yeah,
that's
we
the
did.
one. So like that was a magic in and of itself, right?
Hmm.
And so it just made me feel comfortable, and it made me feel like I didn't have to, like in corporate, like mask up and like pretend and like,
Mm,
be all like, yeah, this is great. And meanwhile, like my world's caving in. It's like, no, this is the
hmm
real shit. Like, let's talk about it. And that's the whole point of actually where I am now in my business is like I'm doing grief coaching now, where that wasn't
hmm
even a thing. Like, even though grief was the motivator and the drive and the energy behind creating all this in the first place. So, yeah, so there was a little, I mean, I knew there was going to be creative components to it,
hmm
which creativity is my spiritual practice. Shout out to my
hmm
fairy godmother, Julia Cameron, the artist way.
That's
Um,
right.
oh my gosh, like that could be a whole
Morning
other podcast.
pages.
Morning pages, artist dates forever. But yeah, it just seemed kind of silly. Like, what am I gonna do? Like entrepreneur, corporate Emily 2.0? Like, no, I like this. I want people to know like this is who I really am. This is really me. And it's really interesting, especially in the coaching space now, because I feel like I do stand out in that way. Mindset is a beautiful thing, and yes, you should definitely work on that if that's something that is important to you. But
hmm
for me, like I'm feelings and emotions all day long, and so I help myself and I help my people like really be able to manage that, because we can be feeling a lot of conflicting things at the same time, and we could think that we're losing our mind, and it's like no, it's just grief, and it's made up of a lot of different emotions. And so yeah, so to be able to do that in my way and not feel like I'm put in a box of like, this is how you treat this, or this is how you treat
hmm
this. It's like, well, no, that didn't necessarily work for me, but this did work for me. And I'm going to tell you and show you how. And if you feel like that might work for you, then please come on board.
Yeah. And there's also, like even on your website in particular, there's also little hints or little bits of like you and your interests too, which I feel like is another way for people to connect with you because in the work that you do, it's so personal. It's so one-on-one, it's so deep, it's so personal, and people need to find the coach for them, the guide for them, the person for them. And so if it's through finding or through clicking with your Bruce Springsteen playlist that's on your website or a certain quote or lyric or picture or something like that talks or like your trip to Iceland or different things where they're like, "Oh my God, like yeah, that's me. This is my person." I love that. I love that we included stuff like that because you never know how people are going to connect. Because when you found me on that directory, I talked about nachos, I talked about Jersey, and I talked about Bruce and
And I was like,
colorful
sign me
stuff.
up.
And you're like, yeah. So going back to your business, so okay, talk to me about what you offered at the beginning, then bring me through how you landed where you are now. And just as a side note, I'm kind of obsessed with that you are in this grief space now, which is literally what was the catalyst for you starting your business and this whole full circle thing. That's so crazy. But okay, go tell me.
It's crazy, and the way that I got here is actually funny because I resisted a lot of it.
Mm,
So, first starting out, yes, I was doing one-on-one yoga instruction and then one-on-one general life coaching. And then
mm-hmm.
once I got my first life coaching client, I was like, oh, okay, I love, love, love this. And it wasn't that I
Awesome.
didn't love teaching yoga, but it just got to the point where life coaching was really like taking up, a lot of my just thoughts and feelings. And I was like, I think this is really the space that I'm meant to be in. So I started to
Mm-hmm.
let go of my yoga people a bit and started to really focus on the general life coaching. I happened to start working as a coach of my own, and I write on LinkedIn all the time. And she was like, I'm looking at your LinkedIn posts and you write about grief a lot. Like, what's your deal? Like, let's talk about this. And I'm like, the reason why I have the life that I have now, the one that I love, is because I went through a lot of grief-stricken experiences, and there's no way to unsee or unfeel or unknow that. Like, there's no going back to what was before those times and what it just shattered as far as like what's important and what's not. She's like, why don't you help other people with that?
Mm,
And I was like, oh, grief girl, like talking about grief 24/7. Like, really? Like, even though I was already doing it and just not
Yeah.
cognizant of it, because
Hmm.
she was the one that pointed out to me. She's like, you literally talk about this all the time. And I'm like, okay, but no. And so I was
Hmm.
thinking at that point, I had changed my business. And I'm like, going back to what we were talking about earlier, if I want to change it again, I get to do that.
Yeah.
And I get to experiment here and see, okay, like could this work? Let me try it out. What's the worst that's going to happen? I don't like it and then I change to something else and that is okay. That is more than okay. Like that's probably going to happen a few more times, like who knows.
Hmm.
So,
Oh, say that louder. It is
yeah.
okay to change your mind, to rip stuff
Yeah.
down, to erase the chalkboard, start over. It's okay. I love that. Yes.
And I understand, and I think that's going back to what we're talking about as far as, people being in corporate of, going to school for the amount of time that they did, putting all the money and the resources and the energy and the time to then be like, well, if I leave this now, I mean, look at how much I put into it. I'm like, yeah, but like you kind of made a jail for yourself. And
Hmm.
so, sure, I hear what you're saying, and it is kind of scary to like kick the walls down and start anew, but at the cost of you staying put is a pretty big
At the
expense that you're
cost. Yep.
paying.
Hmm.
So, so yeah, I was really open to like, all right, let me try this. I wasn't really open. I was kind of fighting her on it, and I was like, let me take a baby
Hmm.
dose and see. And
Hmm.
so I tried it out, and it's been the best, the most fulfilling, the most surprising, because I wanted to make it clear that even though my experiences, although I've had a ton of experiences with grief, but the big ones that got me to really shake up my world and change were the bereavement. At the same time, grief shows up in life in all different facets, whether it's, you know, a job loss or a changing of a job, or you're moving, or you're getting a divorce, or like you name the thing, like anytime that of loss or change or transition, grief is there. Like
Hmm.
not
Good
solely
point.
reserved for the dead.
Yeah.
So that was a thing that I was going back and forth with too. Like, are people going to get this? Are they going to think like, I want to talk to you about, your lost loved ones, which I absolutely do, but there's other losses and there's other changes that are going on in your life that
Hmm.
it might not be categorized at your mind as grief, but it really is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I it surprises me all the time, like the people that reach out to me and they tell me their grief stories, and some of them come in a little bit reserved because they're like, "Oh, I read your website and you've been through a lot," and almost like minimizing their experience. And I'm like,
Mm.
that's not what I do. That's not what this is. Like your grief is valid and justified, and like we need to make space for it in order for you to be able to process it.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, it's it's so strange because it's the most life-affirming work that I've ever done, even though I'm dealing with a pretty heavy thing. And
Wow.
yeah, same. I'm still not over that.
Yeah, that is so cool. And like, when you started to put out that vibe and that messaging that, because of course everyone has experienced the death of a loved one, and it's part of life and it sucks and it's hard and we need help going through that process. But when you started also putting out the idea that it could mean other things or grief could be about other things, what was some of the feedback you got about that? Like, were people like having light bulb moments? Were they struggling? Were they like very then much more eager to tell you their stories? Like,
It was across the board. Some people were just like, lady, no, like this is horrible. Like, stop this. No, thank
mm-hmm,
you. And listen, I get people who are like that because it is so consuming. It
mm-hmm,
it feels like you're drowning. And
mm-hmm,
I know because I was there. And for me, it just got to the point where I'm like, if I don't figure this out, this I am going to drown in this, and I
mm,
don't want to drown in this. And the ones that love me who are gone, that's the last thing they wanted. Like, so if I'm
true.
honoring like their legacy, their memory, and literally anything that they said to me on their deathbed, it's like go live this like wonderful, magical, like fully enriched life. And I'm like, all right, well, how do I do that? And
Mm,
again, grief is an energy. So to be able to transform it in a way that actually put me into action where originally it was paralyzing. I was like, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know what to do from here. Like I'm rotting in bed. Like,
Mhm.
and truthfully, I needed that though. I needed that time, even though friends and family were like, come on, like let's go out, let's do this. And I'm like, I appreciate like what you're trying to do, and I will get there when I get there. But right now, I just need to rot in my bed. Like this is like
Mhm.
horrific. And
Mhm.
so I gave myself that to then be able to emerge of like, okay, this still is awful and the worst thing, but I now have a little bit more room to like bring in some other feelings about it and like how I could, because I'm still here.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
truthfully, if my sister or my mom would be like, hey, I want you to wear all black and I want you to mourn me forever, which I am warning them forever, but I don't want I want you to, shut it down. I probably would have done that. And the
Mhm.
truth is that's not what they were saying at all. Like not even close. Like they when they were so sick, just talking to me about my life and my plans and like what I wanted to do and like they were so encouraging.
Mm.
And for me it's like I can't unhear that. So
Yeah.
I ran with it. But
Mhm.
not before rotting in my bed, just being like, okay, I need this time too.
Mhm.
So being able to figure that out of, okay, how can I make this work for me and work for the people that I work with
Mhm.
has been like a superpower and a gift. And it's a gift of grief.
Mm. Oh, I like that. A gift of grief. It's so amazing that you had that time with your mom and your sister to have those conversations, because that's private and that's special and you'll have that with you always. And that becomes like a guide in and of itself, like a light in and of itself, for your life, your path, what their dreams are for you and all of that. So I think that that's amazing. I'm so grateful that you were able to have that time and those conversations with them. Um, and I'm curious, like with the work that you are doing with your clients, like are there common questions that you get all the time, or are there common experiences that you're like getting the same? Are people going through the same stuff? Is there something that comes up a lot in your work?
Yeah, and it's more job stuff than
Okay.
anything, which um it's funny, even though I very much experienced that and had a whole reckoning with that, I just didn't think like that was going to be a thing as part of my
Okay.
business. But yet people do come for me, they're not happy in their job and they feel stuck in their job and they're grieving whether it's being at a company for a certain amount of time, like sometimes decades, and they feel like what else can I do? Or I'm only
Mm-hmm.
limited to this. So that's been really interesting. So it's like, okay, breaking down all of that and being like, okay, look, what's really meaningful here? What's really important here? And like, how do we, get you to move forward? Whether it's for some looking for a new job or a new place, or for others, it's potentially getting inspired to go out and be an entrepreneur themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, but as far as common questions, it a lot of times it's like asking permission. It's like, is
Hmm.
it okay if? And I'm like, listen, whatever you're feeling, like you don't have to ask permission as far as like what's organically, naturally coming up for you feeling wise. But it's
Oh,
almost like
interesting. Like they're feeling guilty about some feelings they might have.
for sure, or feeling
Ah.
guilty of you know, for like moving on. They use the word moving on, and it's not moving on because moving on means like you leave something and then you go on. Whereas moving forward, it's like you get to bring it with you. And that's been
Mm.
my experience with grief. It's like it's still there. It'll forever
Doesn't
be
go
there.
away.
It'll
Mm-hmm.
never go away. But it's like it gets to shapeshift as you evolve and shapeshift too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the permission thing has been really interesting because I'm like, you're feeling because people have been told, and by people who love the grievers, because they
Mm-hmm.
think that they're doing right by them, of
Sure.
like, oh, you should be over this by now. It's
Ugh.
like, but that's a real thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
those people, unfortunately, are just parroting what has been told to them in their mourning and their grief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not taking like a beat to have some self-reflection of like, do I have to move on from this? Like, no, it's not something you move on from.
Hmm.
So the permission thing has been big. And yeah, feeling like this guilt of moving forward when they feel like they should be, stuck and suffering and in pain. And I'm like, no, that's not what you're here to do. You're not here
Hmm.
to have those experiences all the time and constantly be in fight or flight and constantly being anxious and guilty.
Hmm.
No, 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 no. That's not what this is meant to be.
Hmm. And that we don't have to, yeah, we don't have to just exist to suffer. We can make different choices, like what we've been saying, what we were saying earlier, like there's a different way, there's a different path.
Mhm.
Um, and but at the same time, like if they're coming to you and like looking for permission and they just need that, you know what I mean, to be able to
Yeah,
do the thing, it's like, okay, yes, like you have my permission. If that's, to get you to kind of start this process in a way. I feel like, maybe that's something they need too. Um, but
absolutely.
I'm curious, like, do folks ever come to you with dealing with like anticipatory grief, where, I feel like, my loved one's at the end of the road, or I feel like there's this big tragedy that's going to happen, or I'm really, really worried about something happening. And how do you give suggestions or help them navigate something like that?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's as a country, we're such a unwell mentally and emotionally like
Hmm.
place. And
Hmm.
so a lot of times like anxiety is born from not being able to really control the future, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but in my experience, a lot of people have been told, oh, like you're overreacting or you shouldn't feel this way. And again, like the space that I'm creating is like the antithesis of that. If you're feeling anxious because of whether what's going currently going on in the political landscape or what's currently going on in your job or whatever, like these are justifiable, that
Hmm.
you're valid in feeling this way. And my job isn't to try to eradicate your anxiety or your depression. My job or my role is to give that those feelings a breath of fresh air and to like bring what's kind of, been suppressed for so long up to the surface. So it's like, yeah, we can acknowledge this. Like you're
Hmm.
feeling this way. And spending any sort of energy trying to combat that is just going to make you feel worse. Coupled
Hmm.
with people telling you like you shouldn't feel that way. Why the hell not? Like this is this is a very real thing. So for me, the help isn't like, okay, let me try to like talk you off the ledge or like pretend that as if this isn't happening or sunny siding the situation. Because to me, that's not only is it counterintuitive, but it doesn't feel right to me, and I don't think it feels authentic to the person that I'm working with. So like
Hmm.
that's part of the process is just first of all acknowledging and being okay with that you're not feeling okay at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because the world will tell you, especially in America, keep going, keep moving. Like we don't have time for like your feelings. And it's like, right,
Yeah,
so
put your head
don't
down and just keep going.
put your head down to the and keep the grind going. And it's like, yeah, that you're never gonna hear that from me. So
Love that.
and that's the thing, like I meet with my clients, once a week for an hour, and I'm like, listen, life is a lot of life's gonna happen in between the times that we see each other. So all my clients have my phone number, they have my email, they have like my social media stuff or whatever. So it's like you are more than free and able to contact me. And if I don't get back to you right away, it's either with another client or something else is going on, but it's not going to be too much longer before I get back to you because
Hmm.
I want you to know that you always have space with me to unpack whatever is going on and how you're feeling.
I love that. Like you're a soft place to land, you're a trusted space, you're a safe space for sure. Um and a place for them to feel seen and heard and have that support and that guidance for whatever has happened that they need help dealing with, or whatever is happening that they're going through right now, or whatever is about to happen that they haven't, experienced yet when it comes to grief. So I'm going to definitely put your website and everything in the show notes here. But also for those listening right now, you can head to meetfeltright.com. That's meetfeltwrite.com to learn more about Emily and her work and get in touch with her there. But before we go, I do want to touch too on you have found a bit of a uh, a sweet spot using LinkedIn for your marketing and for your connections and content creation and stuff. So talk to me a little bit about what you're doing over there and why that kind of felt like a good spot for you to hang out because the type of work that you're doing, I always tell people, I just had a an Empower Hour session before this, and I was telling the woman that I was speaking with that, LinkedIn kind of has this vibe or this rep of like, all corporate and we're all in these cubicles and these skyscrapers and everyone's wearing a suit. And I was like, okay, yeah, like those people are on there for sure. But also, all types of people in all types of businesses and industries are on LinkedIn. And it's not just, put on your blazer and do the thing. So talk to me about how you and your work and what your services and your messaging has found a spot over there. What are you doing?
So I started on LinkedIn way back when it felt very wild, wild westy in that, yes, people were using it for, to put their resumes and stuff, but like I was a 20 nothing, like with literally nothing to lose. So I was connecting with CEOs of like Fortune 500 companies being like, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're not going to connect with me. Like, who cares? And a lot of them did. So like I was like, without really having a plan or a strategy, just like growing this network and not really at the time, again, this was forever ago, not writing on it or not using it as the platform that I'm using it for today.
Hmm.
But when I started Felt Right, I wasn't really on LinkedIn so much. I was a little bit, but I was more on Instagram, Facebook, and then I had a TikTok account. And then Instagram banned me for violating community guidelines. And to this day, I don't know what guidelines I violated
I
because
remember that. We have never solved this mystery. Like, what the frig happened? We don't know.
so and Instagram was huge for me because my business at that time was it was like half word of mouth, half like people DMing me on Instagram after I
Hmm.
would write my posts and have my pictures and captions and stuff.
You're such a good writer. P.S. Everyone, go connect with Emily on LinkedIn. Her posts are life-giving. She is a beautiful writer. Continue.
That means a lot coming from you because I'm obsessed with your writing. So
Oh, thank
thank
you.
you. No, thank you. So, I was like, I was upset for maybe 24 hours about Instagram because I literally was like sending them messages with like, my business ID number, like, hey, it's
Yeah.
really me. And they could care less, did not respond back to me. So I was like, what do I do? Because I hate like in-person networking events. I hate
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
But I have a business here and I need to figure something out. So I go back on LinkedIn and I'm like, I have this like these connections and this platform that I like wasn't using. So I just started, I was writing on there probably, I think I started every day. Every day I was writing and putting up a selfie and just telling my story bit by bit. And again, it was pretty incredible the amount of people that started to reach out not short after I started to do that with their own stories of grief. What I find the most interesting about LinkedIn is that the people who are engaging with my stuff, the people who are my first degree connections, aren't necessarily the ones that become clients.
Hmm.
They,
Okay.
it's usually the people who like it or comment, it's the second or third degree people that will always come into my DMs and be like, I don't know how you came up on my feed. Someone that I know like liked your stuff or whatever.
Hmm.
And it's the
Shared
same,
it or whatever.
yeah.
Hmm.
I people repost it and it's people that I've never met before that are
Hmm.
reposting my stuff. And it's that coupled with like I said, hate in-person networking events. I've been going
Hmm.
to a few online that have been really good. And also I started my virtual sip and chat, just being like, just like I like to coach one-on-one, I love to have a conversation and network one-on-one. And
Hmm.
so that's been tremendous. And a lot of the people who show up to these calls are from LinkedIn. So it's really been consistency for me. But it's interesting because as the algorithm changes, and so many people have been talking about this recently of like engagement has been down. So I don't know what LinkedIn is doing, and they're tinkering with it.
Hmm.
And there's plenty of people who are spending time trying to crack that code. And I'm like, hey, if that works for you and you think that's a good way to use your time, by all means do it. For me, I no, I don't want to do that. So
Uh-huh.
I just, again, experimenting, whether it's different times posting or continuing to grow my network. It's still my favorite platform, even though it has been going through some changes lately. It's just,
Yeah,
like the amount of people that I've worked with in my business, like now looking at the whole like breadth of it, a lot of them have been through LinkedIn.
that's
And so
so
I
cool.
can't deny that. And so,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. I feel like there's marketers out there who are like, you need to be on every social media platform and you
Hmm.
need to be putting the message out there. And again, if that's what you feel like is going to best move you forward, by all means do it. For me, what's been really successful is focusing on LinkedIn. But you're still very much in my head of like, hey, your website, like, because when the social media things come down, like, where are people going to go? So
Hmm.
I am grateful that I have the website, and I feel like I need to actually go back there and really start like tinkering with that and putting more content on there, because I do really rely a lot on LinkedIn. And it's
Hmm.
like, that's great. But until like if something were to happen, make sure
Sure.
that you have, the website as the backup, or maybe that'll become the front runner if I
Hmm.
spend a
And
little
you
more
you
time with it.
also, yeah, and you also have an email list too, which is good. To have that. I know lots of folks are still waiting to start theirs, or they, that's too overwhelming to think about, like, or whatever. But if at least you have a way for people to sign up, even if you're not sending emails yet, if you're listening out there, at least have a way for people to
Yeah.
join your email list, because like Emily's saying, if a platform gets shut down or you get hacked or you get locked out or whatever, you own your email list of subscribers. So that's another way to get in touch with them. And then, yeah, the website too, just having those other spaces, I think was great for you to have as like a foundational piece of your business. I love the LinkedIn tips. I'm obsessed with, because I see it. I see how much engagement you get on your posts, and the conversations that are happening in the comments, and sometimes like very deep conversations happening in the comments, which I love, considering we're on LinkedIn, which I just think is not, typical of that space. Would you say that the folks that are signing up with you, or booking calls with you through LinkedIn, are they from like all different types of industries? Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, they're from all over the country, which is awesome. Because
Hmm.
again, I had this vision like I'm gonna open up in Union County, New Jersey, and like those are gonna be my
Hmm.
people. And now I've had clients that were in Canada, so I'm like, okay, felt right's going global. We love this.
International business.
But yeah, I've worked with lawyers, with nurses, people in insurance, other entrepreneurs. That's what's so interesting, and I'd love to talk to you about this, whether it's now or some other time, as far as like this whole idea of niching. Like, yes, grief is a niche, but also at the same time, it's everyone on the planet is impacted or affected by it. So
Universal, yeah.
it is universal. So yeah, as far as like if there's like a career that's like more inclined to do this over another, no, it's
Hmm.
you name the type of person and what they do for work, I've probably worked with them.
That's really cool. I love that. So to wrap up, if you're looking at, someone who, we already talked about the person who might be, stuck in that corporate life and they're thinking of what's next, but for folks who maybe have taken the leap, and they have their own business now, even if it's a side hustle, they have their business. What would you say to them to get them to be open to the idea of, you can play by your own rules. You can do your own thing. You can, color outside the lines. Like, because the person who needed permission from you to feel certain things and is this okay? sometimes people need permission to go their own way and do their own thing. What would you say to somebody like that?
I think what's so cool, especially in today's world, is that you can name the type of person and their socioeconomic background, their religion, their race, whatever. And there is a story, there is a blueprint that has already been somewhat established, right? So,
Mm,
like, if someone thinks, oh, I can't do this, and they put whatever barrier they think that they have going on, like, there is a person who could, that you would read their story and hear about their, path and could immediately, like, remove that barrier of, like, if they could do it, why not you? And
hmm
so I encourage people to, like, the research is huge because even though you're still doing it your own way at the same time, there is some comfort to know that, like, hey, someone in my similar position has been here before and this is the way that they figured out. So
hmm
I'm a big fan of, like, okay, taking a little something over here, tweaking it so that it's like applicable to me. Okay, let me go read and find out about this person over here. Oh, that's really interesting. They did that. Okay. I don't necessarily like 100% of what they're doing, but, like, okay, this is a good sliver that I could take away. And you can kind of
hmm
just remix it to what lands for you. But
Oh,
the
remix. I like that.
yeah, the biggest thing though is I feel like not overwhelming yourself. That quote that you said earlier of, like, booing yourself off stage before you ever get to let anyone see you perform. It's like, yeah, just the little steps will compound,
hmm
but you have to, like, stick with that and
Yeah.
make the step as little as it needs to be in order for you to have some sort of forward movement with it. Because you might be impatient with yourself, and that's not going to do you or anybody, especially if you want to go into business for yourself and the clients that you're going to one day serve. Like, it doesn't behoove them either. So, like, you just have to break it down into digestible bites for yourself so that you don't get
hmm
overwhelmed before that creates a paralysis for you to even begin.
Mm. Oh, yeah. That's a big one. Like, first of all, I love that you basically said, inspiration is everywhere. That's the first thing. Like, you
Mhm.
never know where you're going to get your next big idea or take this component from this person, this component from that person, remix it, make it my own, make it a vibe and style that fits me. But also, yeah, of what is the next most sensey making step? Like, what's the next little piece that I can do so that I can move forward? Because every tiny little step is still a step forward, and that's what is keeping you from being stuck. So anything that can, that can keep your feet moving ahead, that's what we want, no matter how small it is. And don't beat yourself up about how small it is. Like, there was a thing I saw the other day that was like, not every, or you can still be proud of yourself for even the smallest things, the smallest achievements. Not everything has to be this like groundbreaking, earth-shattering event. Like what you were saying earlier about, I'm still here. My business is still here. Like, hello.
Yeah.
Amazing. Emily, thank you so much. You are such a light. I always say Emily is like a joy vitamin in my life. And I just love her so much. So check out meetfeltright.com. Go find her on LinkedIn, Emily Griffith. I'm going to link everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. I love you
Oh,
so much.
I love you so much, and thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Yay. All right. I will talk with you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hey again, it's just me. So isn't she just the best? I loved our conversation. I told her ahead of time, like, there were some things I wanted to talk about and touch on, but I wanted it to just flow and just chat, like how we do when we hang out and, when we get together. And it's so special for me, too, to hear about how her business has grown and evolved um, as she kind of meets her clients where they're at, meeting the moment and kind of going with the tides of how life goes and, what's going on in her life, what she wants, what her clients need from her. Um, and it's just so awesome to see the evolution of her brand. So I hope this was a helpful and fun episode for you. Again, you can find Emily at meetfeltright.com. And you can also look her up on LinkedIn. Her name is Emily Griffith. I'm going to put the links in the show notes. But thank you so much for tuning in. I'd love to hear what you thought about this episode, and I'm excited to bring more fun guests your way really soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.